His Excellency Dr. Tariq Shaki, Her Excellency Dr. Rania El-Mashat, both of whom have AUC ties, fellow trustees, President Richard Yoni, AUC alumni, family and friends, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much and welcome to this celebration and launch of our Centennial campaign. As many of you know, on Saturday we began the celebration of our Centennial year with an enjoyable afternoon at the Tahrir campus. It made me feel old to think that a university that had not turned 50 when I first saw it was now turning 100. I'm curious how many people in this room were at that celebration. I'm sorry to see that because it means I need a different speech. So the university will be celebrating its centennial all of this year. But if you think that's why you're here tonight, then the joke's on you. Tonight is not about the last century, tonight's about the next one. Forget about the little school that struggled in 1919 to find space for 120 students, offering a curriculum that was only slightly more advanced than a high school. Forget that it grew during the following century to a school of 7,000 students on a spectacular new 260-acre campus with a distinguished full-time faculty of more than 450 full-time professors. We are where we are, but tonight we are all ready to start progress on the celebration of our 200th anniversary. For those of you who missed my remarks on Saturday or who slept through them, I argued that AUC survived and indeed flourished during the last century because of the fundamental appeal of its mission, the idea of a private, not-for-profit, liberal arts university completely dedicated to education in Egypt. It's indeed a compelling idea, an institution committed to educating the whole person ethically, intellectually, and physically, one that recognizes the importance of cultural life, that's committed to critical thinking, open debate, and curiosity. My point was that these are compelling ideas that appeal across disciplines, genders, generations, nationalities, religions, and ideology, and that their strength is the wide range of people they attract. They've allowed the university to find defenders regardless of whether the passions of the moment involved politics, economics, religion, ideology, or gender. Nowhere has this been more true than in the breadth of financial support that the university has attracted over its first 100 years. I told you on Saturday the wonderful story of the charitable woman who arrived in Egypt for the first time in 1925 and who, after hearing Charles Watson's desire for a large auditorium, agreed in the space of a few hours to build Ewart Hall. She was attracted by the power of the mission. And it's true that in the early years of the university, most of the financial support came from wealthy American benefactors. But as Egyptians came to trust the university's total commitment to their country, and the university's alumni became influential throughout Egyptian society, they began to provide incredible support as well. Abdul Latif Jamil, whose grandson is here tonight, became a substantial donor 35 years ago. As the AUC reputation spread and the university attracted donors from around the region as well. The university's last campaign to build the new campus demonstrated the tremendous breadth of AUC support. It was led by two trustees, American trustee Paul Cordry and our fellow trustee Moataz Al-Alfi. It resulted in gifts from all over the world, major gifts from Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Qatar, Jordan, and the United States. Gifts from trustees played a very important role, and I'd like all trustees to stand so I can thank them for their past support. They all make gifts to the university. Several of them have already made gifts to this campaign, and by its completion, they all will. Actually, I'd like to ask Motaz El-Alfi to remain standing. Motaz. Because I'd like to recount an example of why being chair of this board is such an honor. Thursday night, he and I had a regularly scheduled dinner that I had asked for to get his wise counsel on many of the issues facing the university, and there are a few. As we finished discussing the issues, he said, "Oh, by the way, boss, you have no idea how amusing it is to have Motaz El-Alfi call me boss." As you know, Egypt is serving this year as chair of the African Union, and in honor of that event, as well as our Centennial, I would like to give 50 scholarships for students from Africa. My heart started racing with gratitude, and he said, "So what do you think?" I stuttered, as I often do, and I said, but Motaz, it's our Centennial. Why not 100 scholarships? He laughed and he said he would check. In any event, he came back to me today and said he would give AUC 100 scholarships for 50 Egyptians and and 50 for students from other African countries. So now my trustees are going to tell me how dumb I was not to ask for 200. Motaz is also a wonderful example of another characteristic of AUC, the tendency for people to keep giving to the university. One of our retired trustees who still gives money is from a family that started giving in the 1920s. Some people call it an addiction. Sometimes I call it a life sentence. But those of you who are repeat givers to AUC know how pleasant it feels. And those of you who haven't tried it, you should. I mentioned early gifts by Abdulatif Jamil. He's the father of Yusuf Jamil. Yusuf and his family's giving to AUC has spanned 3 academic schools over about 35 years. It created the first PhD program at AUC and the Yusuf Jamil Science and Technology Research Center. Today, his generosity continues in a program to train the next generation of civil servants through a program at our School of Global Affairs and Public Policy. I don't know whether their giving is an addiction or a life sentence, but I hope it will continue. Our target for this campaign is to raise $100 million, $1 million for each year of our past. And we began this campaign a few years ago, and I'm pleased to announce tonight that we have already reached 70% of our goal to raise $100 million. I hope that we'll be able to count on everyone in this room to support us. The campaign is being led by Gretchen Welch. Where are you? There you go. She's a friend of many in this room, having lived here when her husband David was the U.S. ambassador to Egypt, who was, by the way, instrumental in arranging for the gift to AUC of $100 million from the U.S. government toward the building of the new campus. This campaign is likely to be a bit different from the last one because there will be fewer physical structures to build and more support for academic activities and scholarships like the ones I announced tonight. My wife and I decided that our gift would support faculty research into critical challenges facing Egypt. Our video tonight will highlight several priorities for the campaign. But as I said at the start, AUC started with the goal to be a private, not-for-profit liberal arts university completely dedicated to Egypt. After an extremely successful first 100 years, it is still a private, not-for-profit liberal arts university completely dedicated to Egypt. Unrecognizable perhaps to its founders in terms of its size and the scope of its programs, but essentially still committed to those principles that I mentioned. What are my hopes for AUC during the next century? To be a private, not-for-profit, liberal arts university completely dedicated to Egypt. Will it have changed and improved as much as we have in this century? Will it be unrecognizable to all of us? I hope so, but that's really up to you. Thank you.
For a century, AUC has